I'll never forget the sound of my son's screams that morning. Not the normal cry of a child who scraped his knee or lost a toy, but a piercing, agonizing shriek that sent ice through my veins and made every molecule in my body spring into action. I was in the kitchen trying to salvage what little dignity I had left by making breakfast for the family that had taken us in after my world fell apart when I heard Leo's voice crack with pain from the living room. I dropped everything and ran my heart, already knowing something was terribly, horribly wrong. What I saw when I burst through that doorway changed everything. My 7-year-old son, my beautiful baby boy, was sitting on the floor with 2 metal mousetraps clamped onto his toes, blood seeping through his small white socks. His face was twisted in agony, tears streaming down his cheeks as he looked up at me with eyes that screamed, "Why?" And there, standing above him, with her phone out recording every second of his suffering, was my half-sister Tiffany, laughing. Not just laughing, she was live streaming it to her tens of thousands of followers, her voice dripping with amusement as she narrated, and the little snowflake discovers real life. Behind her, my mother. Sharon stood with her arms crossed, a cold smile on her face, nodding in approval like this was some kind of valuable life lesson instead of the cruelest thing I'd ever witnessed. Before I go any further, if you're hearing this story and feeling that surge of anger I felt in that moment, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Because what happened next, what I did over the following months, it's a story every parent needs to hear. A story about how far a mother will go to protect her child, and how the people who should love you most can become your worst enemies. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. Because that morning with the mousetraps wasn't the start. It was just the moment I finally woke up. 6 months earlier, I was still married to Mark. We weren't happy, hadn't been for years, but we were functional, or so I thought. Mark worked long hours at his accounting firm, and I stayed home with Leo, trying to be the perfect wife and mother I'd been raised to be. My mother, Sharon, had always been demanding, always had impossibly high standards that I could never quite meet. Growing up, my half-sister Tiffany, younger by 8 years, could do no wrong in Sharon's eyes. Tiffany was the golden child, the one who got the birthday parties, the new clothes, the praise. I was the one who got the criticism, the comparisons, the constant reminders that I should be grateful for what little I received. But I loved my mother anyway. I kept trying to earn her approval, kept hoping that one day she'd look at me the way she looked at Tiffany. When Tiffany decided to become a social media influencer in her early 20s, Sharon was her biggest cheerleader. They'd spend hours together planning content, staging photos, crafting the perfect captions. Meanwhile, I was just Jess, the forgettable older daughter who'd done nothing remarkable except marry young and have a child. Everything fell apart on a Tuesday. Mark came home early from work, which should have been my first warning sign. He sat me down at our kitchen table, wouldn't meet my eyes, and said the words that would destroy the life I'd built. "I want a divorce," just like that. No preamble, no discussion, just a cold statement of fact. When I asked why, when I begged him to talk to me to go to counseling to try, he finally looked at me with something like pity in his eyes. "Jess, I haven't loved you in years. I'm not even sure I ever did. We got married too young and I've just been going through the motions. I deserve to be happy." "What about me? What about our son?" Those questions died in my throat because I could see in his face that he'd already moved on emotionally. This wasn't a discussion, it was a notification. Within a week, he'd moved out. Within a month, the divorce papers were filed. And the truly crushing blow came when his lawyer laid out the settlement. Mark made good money, but somehow, through financial maneuvering I didn't understand, I was left with almost nothing. No alimony because we'd been married less than 10 years. Minimal child support because he'd convinced the court that I had the potential to earn just as much as him, even though I hadn't worked outside the home in 8 years. The house we'd lived in was in his name, only I'd never even thought to ask about that detail when we bought it. I was given 30 days to vacate. I sat in that empty house, boxes piled around me, and realized I had nowhere to go. My savings account, which I'd thought had a few $1,000s, turned out to have only $327. Mark had been slowly draining our joint account for months, preparing for this moment, while I'd been obliviously packing Leo's lunches and folding Mark's laundry. I had no job, no recent work experience, no family except for Sharon and Tiffany, and no friends I felt comfortable burdening with this disaster. So I did what I thought was my only option. I called my mother. Sharon answered on the third ring, and when I explained my situation through tears, there was a long pause. Then she sighed, that particular sigh she'd perfected over the years, that made me feel like an inconvenience, a problem to be solved rather than a daughter in need. "Well, Jessica, you've really made a mess of things, haven't you? I suppose you can come stay with Tiffany and me for a while. But this is temporary, you understand. You need to get your life together." I should have heard the warning in those words. I should have recognized the conditional nature of her offer, the way she made it clear that her help came with strings attached. But I was desperate, and desperation makes you ignore red flags that are practically on fire. Moving into Sharon's house felt like moving backward in time, like I was regressing to some teenage version of myself who hadn't yet learned that my mother's love was transactional. The house was nice, a 4-bedroom suburban home that Sharon had bought after her third divorce, funded partially by the settlement and partially by the growing success of Tiffany's social media career. By this point, Tiffany had built a following of over 50,000 people who tuned in daily to watch her perform what she called pranks, but what I would later recognize as casual cruelty dressed up as entertainment. From day one, the dynamic was clear. This was Sharon and Tiffany's house, and Leo and I were guests. Unwelcome guests at that. Sharon made sure we knew it. "Don't leave your things in the common areas," she'd snap when Leo forgot his toy truck in the living room. "I'm not running a daycare here." Tiffany was somehow even worse, treating us with a mixture of condescension and amusement, like we were characters in her life's sitcom rather than actual people with feelings. I tried to make myself useful to earn our keep. I cooked, I cleaned, I did everyone's laundry, I grocery shopped with the little money I had, trying to contribute. I kept Leo quiet and out of the way, constantly shushing him, afraid that normal childhood noise would give Sharon a reason to throw us out. I was walking on eggshells every single day, hyper-aware of my position as a burden, desperate to prove that we deserved the roof over our heads. But nothing I did was ever enough. Sharon criticized my cooking. "This is too salty, Jessica. Didn't I teach you anything?" She criticized my parenting. "Leo needs more discipline. You're raising him to be weak." She criticized my job search efforts. 3 applications a day, I would have sent out 30 by now. "No wonder you can't find work." Every comment was a small cut, and by the end of each day, I felt like I was bleeding from 1,000 tiny wounds. Tiffany, meanwhile, seemed to find our presence endlessly entertaining in the worst way. She'd accidentally eat the special snacks I'd bought for Leo with my limited funds. She'd blast music at night when I'd finally gotten Leo to sleep, then act wounded when I asked her to turn it down. "God, Jess, you're so uptight. Maybe that's why Mark left you." That comment, delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, felt like a punch to the gut. But the worst part was how Tiffany started incorporating Leo into her content. At first it seemed harmless. "Can Leo be in the background of my video? It'll just take a minute." I said yes because I didn't feel like I could say no, and because Tiffany made it seem like it was no big deal. But then it became a pattern. She'd call Leo over while she was filming, ask him questions designed to make him look silly or immature, edit the footage to make it look like he was dumb or difficult. Her followers ate it up, commenting things like, "That kid is going to grow up to be a disaster, and someone needs to teach him some manners." I wanted to confront her, to tell her to leave my son alone, but every time I opened my mouth, Sharon would give me that look. The look that said, "You're here on borrowed time, and if you make trouble, you'll be out on the street." So I swallowed my anger, my frustration, my growing resentment, and told myself it was temporary. Just until I got a job. Just until I saved enough for a deposit on an apartment. Just until I could stand on my own 2 feet again. Months passed in this purgatory. I sent out hundreds of applications, went to dozens of interviews, but kept getting rejected. "You've been out of the workforce too long. We're looking for someone with more recent experience." We decided to go with another candidate. Each rejection felt personal, felt like confirmation of what Sharon kept telling me, that I was useless, that I'd wasted my potential, that I was a disappointment. Leo, who'd been such a happy child, started changing. He became quiet, withdrawn. He stopped asking to play outside or have friends over. He started having nightmares, waking up crying in the middle of the night. When I asked him what was wrong, he'd just shake his head and say, "Nothing, Mommy." But I knew that living in Sharon's house was breaking him the same way it had broken me as a child. I knew that Tiffany's jokes were humiliating him, teaching him that he was less than that he deserved to be mocked. And I hated myself for not protecting him, for not being strong enough to get us out of there. Then came the night that almost broke me completely. It was a Thursday, and I'd just gotten another rejection email. I was sitting on the bed in the small guest room Leo and I shared, crying as quietly as I could when Sharon walked in without knocking. She stood in the doorway looking at me with disgust. "Pull yourself together, Jessica. You're pathetic. Do you know how embarrassing it is for me to tell people that my daughter is a nearly 40-year-old single mother living in my house with no job and no prospects? You've been here for 4 months and you've done nothing but drain my resources." Something in me snapped just a little. I looked up at her with tears still wet on my face and said, "I'm trying, Mom. I'm trying so hard. I've sent out over 300 applications. I'm doing everything I can." She laughed a cold, bitter sound. "Trying isn't good enough. Results are what matter, and your results are that you're still here, still depending on me, still failing. Just like you always have." Then she paused, her eyes narrowing. "You know what? I think you like it here. I think you're comfortable failing because it means you don't have to try anymore. You're lazy, Jessica. You always have been." I wanted to scream at her, to tell her about all the nights I'd stayed up until 3 in the morning, tailoring resumes and cover letters. I wanted to tell her about the panic attacks I was having in bathroom stalls before interviews. I wanted to tell her that her words were destroying what little self-esteem I had left. But I didn't. I just nodded and said, "I'll do better." She smiled, then satisfied that she'd put me in my place. "See that you do, because Tiffany and I have been talking and we're not sure how much longer we can support you and Leo. You might need to look into other options, shelters, government assistance, that sort of thing." She said it so casually, like she was discussing the weather rather than threatening to put her daughter and grandson on the street. After she left, I laid down next to Leo, who was already asleep, and I cried until I had no tears left. I thought about packing our things and leaving that night, but where would we go? I had no money for a hotel, no friends. I felt comfortable calling at midnight to ask for help. I was trapped, and Sharon knew it. She had all the power, and she wielded it like a weapon. The next few weeks were a special kind of hell. Sharon's comments became more frequent and more cutting. Tiffany started including more footage of Leo in her videos, and the comments from her followers were getting meaner. People were calling my son names, criticizing his appearance, his voice, his mannerisms. I reported the videos, but nothing happened. Tiffany had become skilled at walking the line between what was technically allowed and what was morally reprehensible. I confronted her once, caught her in the kitchen late at night. "Tiffany, please, I'm begging you, stop putting Leo in your videos. People are saying horrible things about him, and he's just a child. He doesn't deserve this." She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Oh my God, Jess, you need to lighten up. It's just the internet. Kids these days need to develop thick skin. Besides, my followers love him. The engagement is through the roof when he's in my content. Do you have any idea how much money I'm making from this?" "I don't care about your money," I said, my voice shaking. "I care about my son's well-being." She rolled her eyes. "You're living in my house rent-free, eating my food, using my utilities. You absolutely should care about my money because it's the only reason you're not homeless right now. Maybe show a little gratitude instead of complaining all the time." Then she walked away, leaving me standing there with my hands trembling and my heart pounding. I started looking into shelters that night. Maybe Sharon was right. Maybe anywhere would be better than this. But when I researched what shelter life would be like for Leo, when I read about the instability, the lack of privacy, the potential dangers, I couldn't do it. I convinced myself to stay just a little longer, to try just a little harder, to make myself invisible enough that Sharon wouldn't kick us out. Then came that morning, that terrible life-changing morning when everything came to a head. It was early, barely 7 o'clock. I was in the kitchen making breakfast, trying to use up the last of the eggs before Sharon could complain about me wasting her food. Leo had gotten up a few minutes earlier, and I'd heard him shuffling toward the bathroom in his pajamas, still half asleep. Then came that scream. I ran. I don't remember dropping the spatula, don't remember knocking over my coffee mug. I just remember running toward the sound of my child's agony, my heart in my throat, every maternal instinct I possessed screaming at me that something was catastrophically wrong. The scene in the living room was like something out of a horror movie. Leo was sitting on the floor near the coffee table, and his feet were caught in 2 metal mousetraps. Not the little plastic kind that snap shut quickly and then release. These were industrial strength, the kind designed to break bones and cause maximum damage. They'd clamped down on his big toes, one on each foot, and I could see blood already soaking through his small socks. The look on his face, that mixture of pain and betrayal and confusion, will haunt me for the rest of my life. But worse than the traps, Worse than the blood, worse than my son's tears, was Tiffany. She was standing there with her phone held up, not helping, not calling for medical assistance, just recording and laughing. Oh my God, this is gold. The little prince discovers that actions have consequences. She was live streaming it. I could see the comments rolling in on her screen, a mixture of shocked emojis and laughing faces and cruel words I couldn't quite read but could imagine. And behind her, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, like she was watching an amusing television show, was my mother. Sharon's face held that cold smile I'd seen so many times before, the one that said she'd orchestrated something clever. "Well, Jessica," she said calmly, as if my son wasn't writhing in pain 3 feet away from her. "Maybe now Leo will learn to watch where he's going. He's been leaving his toys all over this floor, and I'm tired of tripping over them. This is called a teaching moment." Something inside me exploded. Not broke. Exploded. Like a bomb that had been sitting dormant for 37 years suddenly detonating. I moved faster than I've ever moved in my life, lunging at Tiffany and ripping the phone from her hands. She shrieked like I'd slapped her, reaching for it, but I'd already thrown it. The device hit the tile floor of the kitchen with a satisfying crash, the screen splintering into a spider web of cracks. "You evil bitch!" Tiffany screamed, her face contorting with rage. "Do you have any idea how much that phone cost? I had 30,000 people watching. You just destroyed my property and ruined my content." I ignored her. I was already on my knees next to Leo, carefully, gently removing the mousetraps from his toes. He was sobbing, his whole body shaking, and I could see that the damage was severe. The traps had broken skin, had possibly broken bone. He needed medical attention immediately. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, trying to keep my voice calm, even though I was shaking with rage. "Mommy's here, I've got you." Sharon's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't you dare take that tone with your sister. Tiffany's phone is her livelihood and you just destroyed it because you can't handle a little discipline. And frankly, Leo needs to toughen up. Real men don't cry over every little thing." That's when I stood up. I turned to face my mother and I saw her face change slightly as she registered something in my expression that she'd never seen before. I was done. Completely, utterly done. Discipline. My voice came out low and dangerous, each word carefully enunciated. "You think placing mousetraps where a child walks and filming his pain is discipline? It's called tough love," Sharon said, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes now. "Something you clearly know nothing about. You've coddled that boy his entire life and now he's weak, just like you." I picked Leo up in my arms. He was getting heavy at 7 years old, but adrenaline made him feel light as a feather. "We're leaving, right now." Tiffany got in my way, her face still flushed with anger. "You owe me for that phone, Jess. That's $800 and I expect payment by the end of the week." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw nothing but ugliness. Not physical ugliness, but the ugliness of a soul that could film a child's suffering and call it entertainment. "Get out of my way." "Make me," she said, crossing her arms in a gesture that mirrored our mother. I adjusted Leo in my arms and said clearly, "If you don't move, I will walk through you and I will not be gentle. Your choice." She moved, but she was yelling as I carried Leo toward the guest room where our belongings were. "Mom, are you going to let her talk to me like that, Mom?" I could hear Sharon's footsteps behind me as I entered the room and started grabbing things with one hand while holding Leo with the other. Clothes, shoes, Leo's stuffed bear, whatever I could reach. I didn't have a suitcase, so I grabbed a garbage bag from the box I kept under the bed and started stuffing things inside. "Where exactly do you think you're going?" Sharon asked from the doorway. "You have no money, no car that's worth anything, no job, nowhere to go. You'll be crawling back here by tonight, and when you do, I'm not sure I'll let you in." I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I saw her clearly. Not as the mother I desperately wanted her to be, but as she actually was. A woman who fed on control and cruelty, who'd spent my entire childhood making me feel worthless because it made her feel powerful. A woman who'd rather hurt her own grandchild than admit she was wrong. "I would rather sleep in my car than spend another second under your roof," I said. Then she said something that I'll never forget, something so cruel that it almost made me drop Leo. "You can leave, Jessica, but Leo stays here. You're not fit to care for him. You're unstable, you're broke, you're clearly having some kind of breakdown. I'm keeping him here for his own safety, and if you try to take him, I'll call the police and tell them you're kidnapping him and that you hurt him yourself." Leo, who'd been quietly crying against my shoulder, suddenly screamed, "No, no, Grandma, no." He wrapped his arms tighter around my neck, his whole body trembling. "Don't let her take me, Mommy." That's when the last shred of my fear evaporated. Sharon had threatened a lot of things over the years, but threatening to take my son was a line she shouldn't have crossed. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You will not touch my child, ever again. And if you try, if you so much as come near him, I will make you regret the day you gave birth to me." I pushed past her carrying Leo and the hastily packed garbage bag. Tiffany was in the hallway, still on her broken phone, trying to access her social media. "This is assault," she was yelling into the camera, though the screen was so shattered I doubted it was recording. "My sister just assaulted me and destroyed my property. I want everyone to see this. Jess, you're going to pay for this." I kept walking. Through the hallway, through the living room where those goddamn mousetraps still lay on the floor with Leo's blood on them, through the front door that I'd walked through 4 months ago, thinking I was safe. Behind me, I heard Sharon yelling, "Don't bother coming back. You're not welcome here anymore, and I'm calling CPS Jessica. I'm telling them you're an unfit mother, you'll never see Leo again." But I didn't stop. I carried my son to my old Honda Civic, the one with a broken air conditioner and 200,000 miles on it, and I gently placed him in the back seat. His toes were still bleeding, so I grabbed a clean shirt from the garbage bag and carefully wrapped his feet. "We're going to get you to a doctor, baby. Right now." "Where are we going to go, Mommy?" he asked through tears, his voice so small and scared that it broke my heart. "I don't know yet." I admitted, starting the car and saying a silent prayer when it actually turned over on the first try. "But anywhere is better than here." As I pulled out of Sharon's driveway for what I swore would be the last time I heard Tiffany shout one final threat. "I'm calling CPS too. I'm telling them you attacked me and that you hurt Leo. You're done, Jess. You hear me? You're done." I drove to the nearest emergency room, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my mind racing. I had $43 in my wallet. No health insurance for Leo. And no idea how I was going to pay for his treatment. But that didn't matter. What mattered was getting him help, getting him safe, getting him away from the people who'd rather film his pain than prevent it. The ER doctor, a kind woman in her 50s named Dr. Patterson, examined Leo's feet with gentle hands and a concerned expression. "How did this happen?" she asked, looking between me and Leo. I told her the truth. Everything. The mousetraps, Tiffany's live stream, Sharon's cruelty, our living situation. My voice broke multiple times, and by the end I was crying so hard I could barely speak. Dr. Patterson listened to it all without interrupting, and when I finished, she squeezed my shoulder. "I'm going to treat Leo's injuries, and I'm going to do it at no cost to you through the hospital's hardship fund. And then I'm going to give you some information about resources in this area for families in crisis. You're not alone, Jessica. There are people who can help you." Leo's toes weren't broken, thank God, but they were badly bruised and cut. Dr. Patterson cleaned and bandaged them, gave him a children's pain reliever, and wrote a prescription for antibiotics to prevent infection. Then she gave me a folder full of pamphlets and phone numbers. Domestic violence hotlines, legal aid services, emergency housing assistance, food banks, counseling services. "Start here," she said, pointing to one pamphlet in particular. "The Women and Children's Resource Center. They specialize in helping mothers and children escape abusive family situations." "Yes," she added when she saw my confused look. "What you described is abuse. Emotional, psychological, and what happened to Leo this morning was physical abuse. I'd never thought of it that way. In my mind, abuse was hitting screaming, obvious violence. I didn't realize that years of being told I was worthless, of watching my mother favor one child over another, of being financially exploited and emotionally manipulated, all of that was abuse too. Dr. Patterson's words gave a name to what I'd been experiencing, and somehow having a name for it made it feel less like a personal failing and more like something that had been done to me. We left the hospital 3 hours later. Leo was moving slowly, his feet bandaged and tender, but he was calm. The fear had left his eyes, replaced by something that looked almost like relief. "Mommy," he said, as I buckled him into the car seat that was too small for him, but was all we had. "Are we really never going back to Grandma's house?" "Never," I promised him. "I don't care what I have to do, where we have to go, we are never going back there." He smiled, then the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. Good, I didn't like it there. We went to a cheap motel that night, the kind that rents rooms by the hour, but doesn't ask questions when a desperate mother shows up with a traumatized child. I paid $35 for a room with 2 double beds, stained carpet, and a bathroom that smelled like mildew. It was the nicest place I'd ever stayed, We were free. But freedom came with its own terrors. That night, after Leo finally fell asleep, clutching his stuffed bear, I sat on the other bed with my laptop, the one luxury I'd managed to grab when we fled, and I looked up Tiffany's social media. What I found made my blood run cold. The video was everywhere. Tiffany had managed to salvage the footage from her broken phone, and she'd edited it cleverly. The video showed Leo screaming in pain, showed the mousetraps, showed everything up until the moment I smashed her phone. But the caption told a very different story. "When family pranks go wrong," she'd written. "My nephew was playing around with some old mousetraps we had out, and he accidentally set them off. His mom totally overreacted, destroyed my phone, and blamed me for her poor supervision. Now she's saying I did this on purpose. The drama never ends with family. Hashtag family drama, hash misunderstood, cancel culture." The video had 3 million views, 3 million, and the comments were a nightmare. Some people saw through her lies and were calling her out, but many more were on her side. "That mom sounds crazy. She destroyed property because her kid was being dumb. Kids need to learn to be careful. The sister seems like the victim here." I felt sick. Tiffany had taken my son's trauma and turned it into content, into views, into money. And worse, she'd flipped the narrative to make herself look like the victim. I started typing out a response, wanting to set the record straight, but then I stopped. What good would it do? Who would believe me over her when she had 50,000 followers and I had nobody? That's when I saw another post, this one from Sharon. A long, dramatic statement about how I'd stolen Leo from her house, how she was concerned for his safety, given my mental instability, and how she was exploring legal options to protect her grandson. She'd even posted a photo of herself looking sad and worried, like she was a concerned grandmother instead of the architect of this nightmare. The comments on her post were filled with sympathy. "Stay strong. You're doing the right thing. That daughter sounds like a piece of work." I wanted to scream, to throw my laptop across the room, to do something, anything to make people see the truth. But I was one person with no platform, no credibility, and no resources. I was powerless. Or so I thought. The next morning, I woke up to a phone call that nearly stopped my heart. It was a woman from Child Protective Services. "Ms. Jessica Hartley," she asked in a professional but not unfriendly voice. "This is Dana Morrison from CPS. I'm calling because we received a report yesterday alleging child abuse and neglect. I need to schedule a time to meet with you and your son to discuss these allegations." My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. "What? Who made a report?" "I'm not at liberty to disclose that information, but I can tell you that we take all reports seriously. Can you meet with me today?" I wanted to refuse, wanted to run, wanted to disappear, but I knew that would only make things worse. "Yes, we're staying at the Riverside Motel, room 23. After I hung up, I sat on the bed and tried not to cry, loud enough to wake Leo. This was Sharon's doing, I knew it. She'd actually called CPS on me, had actually tried to take my son away because I dared to stand up to her. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Dana Morrison arrived at 11. She was a woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes but a professional demeanor. She interviewed me first, asking detailed questions about our living situation. Leo's injury, my relationship with my mother and sister. I told her everything, holding nothing back. I showed her the hospital records from Leo's treatment. I showed her Tiffany's social media posts. I explained our financial situation, my divorce, my desperate job search. Then she interviewed Leo separately, taking him into the motel bathroom where they could talk privately. I sat on the bed, my heart pounding, imagining all the ways this could go wrong. What if Leo was too scared to tell the truth? What if Sharon had coached him somehow? What if CPS decided I was unfit and took him away? 20 minutes later, they emerged. Dana's expression was unreadable, but Leo came straight to me and crawled into my lap, something he hadn't done in over a year. "Ms. Hartley," Dana said, sitting across from us. "I want to be clear with you. Based on my investigation today, I see no evidence that you have abused or neglected your son. In fact, it appears you removed him from an abusive situation and sought immediate medical care for his injuries. However," she continued, and my heart sank, "I do have concerns about your current living situation. This motel is not suitable for long-term residents with a child." "I know," I whispered. "I'm trying. I'm looking for work for housing, for anything." She nodded. "I'm going to provide you with a list of resources. Emergency housing, job placement services, food assistance. I'm also going to keep your case open for 60 days, which means I'll check in with you periodically to make sure you and Leo are safe and stable. This isn't a punishment, she added quickly when she saw my face. It's actually protection. If your mother or sister calls again, making false allegations, there will already be a record showing that we investigated and found their claims to be unsubstantiated. Do you understand? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. One more thing, Dana said, pulling out a business card. You need a lawyer. What your mother and sister did to your son could constitute child abuse, and what they're doing now with false CPS reports could be considered harassment. This is a family law attorney who does pro bono work. Call her, tell her I referred you. After Dana left, I looked at the business card. The name embossed on it was Sarah Chen, attorney at law, specializing in family law and child advocacy. Beneath that was a phone number and an address downtown. I called the number that afternoon, half expecting to get a voicemail or a secretary who would tell me Ms. Chen was too busy to take on another charity case. Instead, a man's voice answered. Chen and Associates, this is David Chen. Oh, I'm sorry, I was trying to reach Sarah Chen. You've got her brother, he said, and I could hear a smile in his voice. Sarah's in court today, but I'm also an attorney here. How can I help you? I explained my situation, stumbling over words, apologizing for wasting his time, expecting him to politely brush me off. Instead, he listened carefully, asked clarifying questions, and when I finished, he said, Can you come into our office tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock? Bring any documentation you have. Medical records, social media posts, text messages, anything. I don't have any money, I admitted, my face burning with shame. I can't afford an attorney. Did Dana Morrison refer you? Yes. Then you can afford us. We'll discuss payment arrangements, but I can tell you right now that your case is exactly the kind of thing we take on. These people hurt your child and are now trying to destroy your reputation and your custody. That's not just wrong, it's illegal, and we're going to make sure they face consequences. I cried when I hung up the phone. Not sad tears, but something else. Hope, maybe. Or just relief that someone believed me, someone was on my side. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding. I created a new anonymous social media account. Not to attack Tiffany or Sharon, but to start telling my side of the story. I didn't use my name, didn't use Leo's name. I just called myself a survivor and wrote a post titled, What the Viral Mousetraps Video Doesn't Show You. I laid it all out. The emotional abuse I'd endured my whole life. The financial exploitation. The way Sharon had used my desperate situation to control me. The way Tiffany had used my son for content without permission. The truth about that morning, about how the mousetraps weren't an accident, but were deliberately placed where Leo walked barefoot every morning. I included screenshots of Sharon's old text messages calling Leo a burden. I included screenshots of Tiffany's DMs to her friends where she called Leo annoying and stupid and said she wished we'd never moved in. I hesitated before hitting post, my finger hovering over the button. Once I did this, there was no going back. This would be war. But then I looked at Leo sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, and I pressed post. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People started sharing my post within hours. Some of Tiffany's followers found it and started asking questions in her comments. Is this true? Did you really plant those mousetraps? How much were you making off videos featuring this kid? Tiffany deleted comments as fast as they appeared, but more kept coming. Then something unexpected happened. A journalist named Marcus Rivera, who ran an investigative news site focused on social media exploitation, reached out to me through the anonymous account. I'd like to tell your story properly, his message said. With your permission, I'd like to investigate your sister's channel, interview people who know your family, and expose what really happened. Are you interested? I met with David Chen the next morning as scheduled, and I showed him Marcus's message. David grinned, a sharp, fierce expression that reminded me of a shark. Oh, this is good. This is very good. But before you agree to anything with this journalist, let me explain what we're going to do legally. Over the next hour, David laid out a battle plan that was both terrifying and exhilarating. We were going to sue Tiffany and Sharon for multiple things. Intentional infliction of emotional distress for the years of abuse. Assault for the Mousetraps incident. Defamation for their false statements about me. Invasion of privacy for using Leo's image without permission. And we were going to file for a permanent restraining order prohibiting them from contacting Leo or me ever again. This is going to be expensive, I protested, and long. I don't have money or time. David shook his head. Here's the thing about your sister. She's made a lot of money off her social media, and she's been posting content featuring Leo without your permission for months. That's not just morally wrong, it's legally wrong. Minors can't consent to being in commercial content. Only their parents can give that permission. She's been profiting off your son without your consent. That's a slam dunk case, and when we win, we'll recoup our legal fees from her settlement. When we win, not if. When, he said firmly. The evidence is overwhelming. This isn't going to be easy, and they're going to fight back hard. Your mother and sister strike me as the type who don't go down without swinging. But you have the truth on your side, you have documentation, and you have a son who can testify if needed. We're going to win. I authorized him to work with Marcus Rivera, and over the following weeks, the investigative piece started coming together. Marcus tracked down my old neighbors, who confirmed that Sharon had always treated me differently than Tiffany. He found Leo's former preschool teachers, who remembered Tiffany showing up for pickup and being rough with Leo, once making him cry in front of everyone. He got a digital forensics expert to analyze Tiffany's social media and calculate approximately how much money she'd made from posts featuring Leo. The number was staggering, over $40,000 in the past 4 months alone. Meanwhile, I was still living day to day. The motel was eating through what little money I had. I finally got a job at a supermarket working evening shifts for minimum wage, while Leo stayed with a babysitter from the resource center that Dana had recommended. It wasn't much, but it was honest work, and it was mine. Then my ex-husband Mark reached out. I almost didn't answer when I saw his name on my phone, but curiosity won out. Jess, he said, his voice strained. I saw what's been happening online, with your mom and Tiffany. Is it true? Did they really do those things to Leo? Yes, I said flatly. All of it. There was a long pause. I owe you an apology. Several apologies. I wasn't there for you during the marriage, I wasn't there for you during the divorce, and I wasn't there when you needed help. I let you walk into a bad situation, and I failed to protect our son. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at him to tell him that sorry wasn't enough, that his absence had contributed to all of this. But another part of me was just tired. Thank you, I finally said. I appreciate you saying that. I want to help, he continued. I talked to my lawyer, and I'm going to file to modify our custody agreement. Not to take Leo away from you, he added quickly, but to establish that I support you, having full custody, and to increase my child support payments. And I'm willing to testify in your case against your family. I saw things when we were married, times when your mother was cruel to you, times when Tiffany was awful to Leo. I didn't speak up then because I was a coward, but I'll speak up now if it helps. I cried on the phone with my ex-husband, and somehow it felt like a small piece of healing. He'd been part of the problem, but at least he was trying to be part of the solution now. 6 weeks after the Mousetraps incident, Marcus Rivera's investigative piece went live. It was titled, "The Dark Side of Family Vlogging: How One Influencer Built an Empire on a Child's Pain." The article was comprehensive, well-researched, and damning. It included interviews with a dozen people, screenshots of private messages, analysis of Tiffany's earnings, and expert commentary on the psychological impact of what had been done to Leo. The response was explosive. Within 12 hours, the article had 500,000 views. Tiffany's sponsors started dropping her. Companies that had paid her to promote their products released statements saying they were horrified to learn about her actions and were immediately terminating their partnerships. Her follower count started dropping precipitously as people abandoned her channel in droves. Sharon and Tiffany released a statement calling the article lies and slander and threatening to sue Marcus for defamation. But their threat was hollow, and everyone knew it. The evidence was too strong, too public, too damaging. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Tiffany, desperate to salvage her reputation, decided to do a live stream to set the record straight. David advised me not to watch it, said it would only upset me, but I watched anyway. I needed to see her face when her world fell apart. She started the stream with a prepared statement, her voice shaky but defiant. I want to address the recent allegations that have been made against my mother and me. First of all, these accusations are completely false. My sister has always been dramatic and unstable, and she's now trying to destroy my career because she's jealous of my success. The incident with my nephew was a tragic accident, and I deeply regret that it happened. But to suggest that it was intentional, that we would ever deliberately hurt a child, is absolutely ridiculous. The chat was moving too fast to read, but I could see that it wasn't going well for her. People were calling her out, demanding answers, posting links to Marcus's article. She kept trying to redirect to control the narrative, but it was slipping through her fingers. Then David executed the masterstroke we'd been planning. Right in the middle of Tiffany's live stream, right as she was painting herself as the victim, He released a statement on his law firm's website. It included audio that I'd forgotten I had, a voice message that Sharon had left me 2 days after we fled, before she knew I might use it against her. In the message, Sharon said clear as day, "You think you can just take Leo and disappear? I'll make sure everyone knows what a terrible mother you are. I'll call CPS, I'll call your ex-husband, I'll ruin your life. That boy belongs with me where he can be raised properly instead of being coddled by a failure like you." The audio file went viral faster than anything Tiffany had ever posted. Someone screen recorded her live stream and synced it with the audio release, creating a split screen showing Tiffany claiming innocence while her mother's threats played in the background. It was damning, undeniable, and absolutely brutal. Tiffany's live stream descended into chaos. Her face went white as she realized what had happened. She tried to end the stream, but fumbled with her phone, and viewers got to watch her panic in real time. "That's out of context," she screamed at someone off camera. Probably Sharon. "Mom, they're using that message you left. What do we do?" The stream cut off, but the damage was done. By that evening, every major news outlet was covering the story. Influencer accused of child abuse faces backlash. Family vlogging gone wrong. When pranks become abuse. My story. Leo's story was everywhere. Sharon tried to do damage control, hiring a PR firm to craft a response, but it was too late. Their lawyer advised them to stop making public statements, which just made them look guilty. Tiffany's channel was reported so many times that the platform suspended it pending investigation. Her Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter accounts all faced similar fates. The legal case moved forward. The restraining order was granted immediately, prohibiting Sharon and Tiffany from coming within 500 feet of Leo or me. CPS closed their investigation with a finding of unsubstantiated against me and opened one against Sharon for the Mousetraps incident. And the civil lawsuit began its slow grind through the court system. David was right about them fighting back. They hired an expensive lawyer who tried every trick in the book. They claimed I'd edited Sharon's voice message. They claimed I'd coached Leo to lie. They claimed I was mentally ill and making everything up. They tried to get the case dismissed 6 different ways. But the evidence was overwhelming and their credibility was shot. Every time they made a claim, we had documentation to disprove it. Every time they tried to paint me as unstable, we had witnesses who said otherwise. And the public court of opinion had already rendered its verdict. They were guilty. The trial itself took 3 days. I had to testify, had to relive the worst moments of my life in front of a courtroom full of strangers. I had to watch Leo testify via video link. His small voice describing how scared he'd felt, how much it had hurt, how he thought his grandmother and aunt loved him until that morning. I had to watch Mark testify, admitting his failures as a husband and father, describing the times he'd witnessed Sharon's cruelty. I had to watch neighbors, teachers, and the ER doctor all take the stand to corroborate my story. Sharon and Tiffany's lawyer tried his best, but there was nothing he could do. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a verdict in my favor on all counts. The judge awarded damages of $350,000, the cost of Leo's medical treatment and ongoing therapy, my lost wages, pain, and suffering, punitive damages for the egregious nature of their actions. When the verdict was read, Sharon sat stone-faced, but Tiffany broke down sobbing. Not, I think, because she felt remorse, but because she realized that her life as she knew it was over. All the money she'd made from her influencer career gone, her reputation destroyed, her mother's retirement savings drained to pay lawyers and settlements. After the trial, David sat with me in a quiet conference room and explained what would happen next. They'll have to sell assets to pay the judgment. Sharon's house, Tiffany's car, whatever they have of value. The restraining order is permanent. They'll never be able to contact you or Leo again. And they'll both have to live with the fact that everyone knows what they did. "It's really over," I asked, hardly daring to believe it. "It's really over," he confirmed. "You won, Jess. You protected your son, you stood up to your abusers, and you won." I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. And I did in a way. But mostly I just felt exhausted and sad. Because even though I'd won, even though justice had been served, I couldn't get back the years I'd lost to Sharon's manipulation or the childhood Leo had been denied by Tiffany's cruelty. But I could build something new. With the settlement money, I was able to rent a small house in a good school district. I furnished it modestly but comfortably, making sure Leo had his own room, his own space to heal. I found a better job, one with benefits and reasonable hours. I started therapy for both Leo and myself, working through the trauma we'd experienced. And I started Leo's Voice, a small nonprofit dedicated to protecting children from exploitation by family members on social media. We pushed for legislation requiring parental consent for featuring minors in commercial content. We provided legal resources to families fighting similar battles. We offered counseling to children who'd been used for content without their permission. The work was hard, but it was meaningful. Every child we helped, every law we influenced, every family we supported, it felt like I was turning our pain into purpose. I heard through mutual acquaintances what happened to Sharon and Tiffany. Sharon had to sell her house and move into a small apartment on the bad side of town. Her friends abandoned her once the truth came out, and she lived alone, isolated by her own cruelty. Tiffany couldn't find work in social media ever again. Her name was poison in that industry. She eventually got a job at a fast food restaurant, working for minimum wage, and living in a studio apartment, her dreams of influencer fame destroyed by her own actions. Part of me felt sorry for them. Part of me remembered the grandmother who'd sung lullabies to me when I was very small, before her expectations became weapons. Part of me remembered the little sister who'd once looked up to me before Sharon poisoned her with favoritism. But mostly I felt nothing. They'd made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. A year after the trial, I was working in my office at the nonprofit when I got an unexpected visitor. The receptionist buzzed me to say that someone named Tiffany was in the lobby asking to see me. My first instinct was to refuse to call the police and report a restraining order violation. But curiosity won out. I went to the lobby with my phone in hand, ready to dial 911 if needed. Tiffany looked different, smaller, somehow diminished. Her hair was dull, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a fast food uniform, and she looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. When she saw me, she didn't approach. She just stood there wringing her hands. "You're violating the restraining order," I said coldly. "I could have you arrested right now." "I know," she said quietly. "I just needed to tell you something, and then I'll leave and you'll never see me again. I promise." When I didn't respond, she continued, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for what I did to Leo, for what I did to you. I was so caught up in the likes and the followers and the money that I stopped seeing him as a person. I stopped seeing you as a person. I let Mom convince me that it was okay, that it was just fun, that you were overreacting. But it wasn't okay. It was cruel, and it was wrong, and I can't take it back." I looked at her, trying to determine if this was genuine remorse or just another manipulation. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "What do you want from me? Forgiveness, absolution?" She shook her head, tears running down her face. "No, I don't deserve those things. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what we did, what I did, and I hate myself for it. I think about Leo every day, about how scared he must have been, how much we hurt him. And I know I can never make it right, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry." I stood there for a long moment, looking at this shell of the person who'd tormented my son. And I felt something I didn't expect to feel. Pity, not forgiveness, but pity. "I hope you find a way to live with what you've done," I finally said. "And I hope you never do anything like this to anyone else ever again. But I can't forgive you, Tiffany. What you did to Leo, to me, it broke something that can't be fixed. So I appreciate your apology, but it doesn't change anything." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I understand. Thank you for listening." Then she turned and walked out of my office, out of my life, and I never saw her again. That night, I told Leo about Tiffany's visit. He was quiet for a long time, processing. Finally, he asked, "Do you think she really meant it?" "I think she does now," I said carefully. "But it doesn't matter, does it? What matters is that we're safe, we're together, and we're building a good life." He nodded and went back to his homework, seemingly satisfied. But later that night, when I was tucking him into bed, he said something that made my heart ache. "Mom, thank you for saving me. I know it was hard, but you did it anyway. You're the bravest person I know." I kissed his forehead, fighting back tears. "You're pretty brave yourself, kiddo, and I will always, always protect you. That's what mothers do." Now, 2 years later, Leo is thriving. He's in therapy, he's doing well in school. He has friends, he laughs easily, and he's no longer scared. He knows about what happened, knows about the trial and the verdict, and he's old enough to understand that what Sharon and Tiffany did was wrong. But he's also learned something else. He's learned that standing up to bullies, even when they're family, even when it's scary, is worth it. And I've learned something too. I've learned that my worth isn't determined by Sharon's approval or anyone else's. I've learned that protecting my child is more important than keeping the peace. I've learned that I'm stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. I've learned that sometimes love means walking away, setting boundaries, and refusing to accept abuse. Is this a happy ending, I suppose? That depends on how you define happiness. My mother and I will never reconcile. Tiffany and I will never be sisters again. Part of me will always carry the scars of growing up feeling unloved and unworthy. But I'm free. Leo is safe, and we're building a life based on authenticity and mutual respect, rather than manipulation and fear. That feels like happiness to me. So let me ask you this. Those of you who've listened to my story, have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between family loyalty and protecting yourself or your child? What would you do if someone you loved hurt someone you loved more? And most importantly, do you believe that people who harm children, even family members, should face real consequences? Drop your answers in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, hit that like button and subscribe. Because stories like mine, they matter. They remind us that we're not alone, that abuse can happen in any family, and that we all have the power to break the cycle. The most important lesson I can share is this. You deserve to be treated with respect, dignity, and kindness, especially by the people who claim to love you. And if they can't give you that, if they actively hurt you or your children, then they don't deserve a place in your life, no matter how much DNA you share. Family is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down. And if your family is tearing you down, you have every right to walk away and build a new family, one based on love instead of obligation. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gave you strength if you needed it, or perspective if you didn't. And I hope that Leo and I, we give you hope that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward if you're brave enough to take the first step.